Being gay was fine. Being openly gay was a problem when it came to the military in the United States. According to the policymakers of the past, openly discussing your sexual orientation would distract and lower the morale of the military, and hence it's best if it's packed in one's closet, never to be worn in public. This prejudice was so acceptable that there was even a law that enforced it. Today on Behind the Date, we will deep dive into this very strange and bizarre law, why it existed, what was its aftermath, why was it so controversial, and so much more. We are talking about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was a United States military policy that was introduced in 1993 by President Bill Clinton. The policy stated that any homosexual or bisexual person who admitted to their sexual orientation would be discharged from military service. The policy was controversial from its inception and sparked a great deal of debate among members of the military, the public, and politicians. It was met with criticism from both supporters and opponents of gay rights. Opponents argued that the policy was discriminatory and that it prevented gay and lesbian service members from being open about their sexuality. Supporters argued that the policy was a necessary compromise that allowed gay and lesbian service members to serve without fear of harassment or discrimination. Discrimination against homosexuals in the American military is a major issue that has been going on for many decades and has yet to be fully addressed. It is a form of prejudice and bigotry that has been entrenched in the armed forces since its inception and continues to be a problem in the 21st century. The history of discrimination against homosexuals in the U.S. military dates back to the beginning of the 20th century, when the U.S. Army adopted a policy of excluding homosexuals from military service. This policy was based on the assumption that homosexuals were psychologically unfit for service, and that their presence would be detrimental to the morale of the military. This policy remained in place until the end of the Cold War, when the military began to reconsider its stance on homosexuality. So it's not a surprise that a bigoted government would take such a step in the 90s. But as the century turned, many realized the problem the law possessed. Hence even thought it took them 18 years necessary were eventually taken to repeal the law and end this discrimination. The policy remained in place until 2010, when President Obama signed a repeal of the policy and was put into effect by 2011. The repeal of DADT was a long and difficult process. It began with a lawsuit brought by the Log Cabin Republicans in 2004 against the U.S. government. The lawsuit argued that the policy violated the constitutional rights of gay and lesbian individuals. The lawsuit was unsuccessful, but it sparked a national dialogue about the policy. This led to President Obama's promise to repeal the policy during his 2008 presidential campaign. The repeal of DADT was a historic moment for the LGBT community. It was the first time that openly gay and lesbian individuals could serve in the U.S. military without any repercussions. It was also a major victory for the LGBT rights movement, as it showed that the government was beginning to recognize the rights of LGBT individuals. The repeal had a positive impact on the U.S. military. It allowed the military to recruit more qualified individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation. It also helped to create a more inclusive and tolerant environment within the military and reduce instances of harassment and discrimination within the military. The repeal was also largely supported by the American public, but it was also met with some resistance. Opponents argued that allowing openly gay service members would lead to a decline in unit cohesion and morale, as well as a decrease in military readiness. These fears, however, have not been realized. A 2012 survey of service members found that 75% of active duty personnel were comfortable with the repeal and supported its implementation. The survey found that there had been no effect on military readiness or effectiveness due to the repeal. Whatever misconceptions were were soon broken, as the aftermath of the DADT repeal has been nothing but positive. Since the repeal of DADT, the number of openly LGBTQ+ service members has increased dramatically. According to U.S. Census Bureau and the Federal Reserve Board, there are an estimated 79,000 actively serving LGBTQ+ service members, and if you compare it to the numbers of 2015, which stood at 16,000, the numbers now are way higher. The repeal has also had a positive impact on LGBTQ+ service members' mental health. A study by the American Psychological Association found that after the repeal of the policy, LGBTQ+ service members experienced decreased stigma and increased feelings of safety and acceptance. The study also found that the repeal of DADT improved the mental health of LGBTQ+ service members, leading to increased job satisfaction, improved morale, and decreased anxiety and depression. A survey by the Pew Research Center found that 58% of Americans supported allowing openly LGBTQ people to serve in the armed forces, and fewer than half of people were against it. This widespread public support suggested that the repeal of DADT has been an important step in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights and acceptance, which everyone agreed upon. But then this is America. What about other countries? Do they also protect the LGBTQ+ military personnel? In Canada, the Canadian Forces has had an open policy towards homosexuals since 1992. Homosexuals are allowed to serve openly in the military and are protected from discrimination based on their sexual orientation. The United Kingdom also has an open policy towards homosexuals serving in the military. Homosexuals are allowed to serve openly and are protected from discrimination. The Ministry of Defense has also taken steps to ensure that homosexuals are treated equally in the military and that they are not discriminated against. In Australia, homosexuals have been allowed to serve openly since 1992. The Australian Defence Force also has policies in place to ensure that homosexuals are not discriminated against and that they are treated equally. In many other countries, however, homosexuals are still not allowed to serve openly in the military. Russia, for example, has a law that prohibits homosexuals from serving in the military. Other countries, such as India, have policies in place that prohibit homosexuals from serving, but do not explicitly state that homosexuals are not allowed to serve. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We post interesting stories from around the world every other day.